life at street level, but might cut down on their personal modal choices. Is there any change in the last 10 years in that regard? Are people more conscious of what Simon referred to as the cost? With all their modal choices, that imposes external cost on everybody. Are they more aware of that now than they were then?
On this point, I'm rather pessimistic. Not quite.
Okay, we had a question here. Mike.
Thank you. I'm Edwin, Vice Chairman of Clear the Air, and we're trying to, look for zero emission. Actually, difficult, but possible. Now, actually, from the few, meeting last time, we have the three cities from Shanghai, New York, about the highliner design on the seaside walkway. Now, I think that's the possibility, because why? Like cycling, walking, it is very good. But cycling, why is not popular? Because of safety, of the congestion, a lot of casualty, accident. But it's possible if we promote the waterway promenade. By using the highliner design, that means you have actually two stories. One story is walking, the underground, land level one is walk for cycling and jogging. So people can walk on top, and if it's too sunny or raining, then you can switch on that. And the whole sea line can join together, because there will be no transport traffic, that means vehicles or whatever, to create the dangerous to pedestrian, cycling, joggers, and that will be a complete beautification of Hong Kong Harbour. And actually, we now have the chance, if we push the designing for Hong Kong, it's possible, but we have to work together. I like the comments from all your experts.
About trams on the waterfront? Where's the tram on the waterfront?
Yes. First, before saying a few words about tram on the waterfront and on this type of ideas, I would like to come back just to what was said before, and is the public ready in Hong Kong to welcome more these ideas than it was 10 years ago. Of course, I cannot say what happened 10 years ago. I was not there. I can say what I'm seeing today, discussing with different stakeholders in Hong Kong. And I can compare that to what happened in other countries in the world where I've been working and implementing such solutions, but were not welcomed by the public at the beginning. And the only thing I can say is it was much more accepted and welcome once there has been some trials that have worked and that have shown that it's possible and it has a positive impact. So that's exactly what happened. And when it started in some countries in Europe to redevelop some city centers and to regain space and to get rid of buses, to put them a bit far from the city centers, at the beginning there was a lot of people fighting against that. But once it has worked somewhere, then the number of cases have increased a lot. So it's maybe one way to do things. And it's, as I said, it's always easier to implement that in a new area than in an area which is already completely developed and where it's more difficult to regain space. So that's not a real answer, but my point is maybe people are not so much ready and not more ready they were 10 years ago, but it doesn't prevent to make these things. And of course, after there is political decisions, there is a strong will from many stakeholders to push for that, and even if there is some reluctance and some opposition from the public, it is feasible. And if we speak about the waterfront, it's typically the type of discussion that I've been having in the past year, discussing with many stakeholders about this issue. How can we make this waterfront in one side more pedestrian friendly, more accessible to people, like a promenade, something which is nicer for Hong Kong citizens. And it's always the same debate, and I would say that the population is quite split. Many people are, yes, willing to see this happening, But after, to really promote that and to see how is it feasible to do that and what is the cost of doing that, then of course you see many opposition coming in front of that. So there is no real answer to that, and I think that it's very difficult to see is the public in Hong Kong ready to implement this type of issues. The more we will communicate about what was said about what is the cost today of keeping the situation as it is, what is the cost for our quality of life, what do we want for the city, what do we want for our children to live in Hong Kong, this is like that the mindset of people will change. And again, example of other cities in the world are proving that this mindset is changing when you have example of situation where you have been able to really change the quality of life of people in this area. Again, some city center in France, people were believing that it was impossible to get rid of cars, because if you get rid of the cars in these city centers, then it kills everything. It kills commercial area, it kills everything. And now again, 5 years after, people are all saying completely the opposite. The same people that were fighting against that 10 years ago, they are not all saying now that, wow, we cannot change the situation, and now we need to promote this type of solution in other places.
It's a matter of leadership, and I think one of the problems is that we haven't had really very much leadership. Arguably, the leadership we've had on these issues, whether it's how to make use of the waterfront or addressing some of the terrible congestion and air pollution problems, has usually not been the right kind of leadership. And if you have leadership and you demonstrate something, then people will support it. But if they don't see for themselves how it can be, it's not going to come from the grassroots for the most part, because people cannot really imagine what it would be like, how you could fix this problem.
Exactly. In the cities in Europe, again, it comes from top to bottom, for sure. At the beginning, it was a high leadership, people convinced of that, and selling a project to the public, and showing all the impact that can have this project. And once it's implemented, of course, promoting it. So yes, it will not come from the ground.
I want to say something about the waterfront. I think it's going to be a mistake to look at the waterfront as a recreational amenity for the people of Hong Kong only, or only as a recreational amenity. And I think that's the irony of this is the waterfront has historically evolved. I mean, the waterfronts, not just in Hong Kong, but all over the world, because they are kind of the edge of the built area, are seen as opportunities for placing infrastructure, especially transport infrastructure. So the history that we are trying to undo in Hong Kong and many other places in the world is the decades of using the waterfront as a place where you dump all the things that you can't squeeze in the urban area, like roads and so on. I think that the opportunity we have now, we should work on, is doing exactly the same thing, but using it in an opportunistic way to create a new pedestrian infrastructure. Meaning, what we can do in the dense urban areas, because we're stuck with roads that are too narrow and sidewalks that are too narrow, let's use a waterfront as our strategic reserve for pedestrian connectivity. And I think that people will be surprised when you're on the waterfront, suddenly how distances become short, how suddenly walking from Central to Causeway Bay and even to North Point is not as difficult as it seems. And especially on Hong Kong Island, which is relatively shallow, because between the mountain and the water, it's not very deep. The waterfront can become a spine of movement that's not just about, I don't just want to see, playgrounds and cycling. I mean, cycling is great. I think that's a place where it actually should go. But not just as a recreational activity, but really incorporate it as a strategic pedestrian or movement spine for the people of New York instead of roads.
We have time. Well, we're actually running late, but we can have one more question. Okay, there. We have to vacate the venue.
Simon and Julian.
Oh, okay. And then Simon.
Actually, it's more of a comment than really a question. Is that from all the speakers, basically, I agree with Oren. Pedestrianization is probably it's more important than cycling. But the point about cycling is we're not asking for specific infrastructure for cycling, because cycling could be used on a pedestrian walkway, like Osaka, Tokyo, Japan. It's just a matter of education and again, the leadership, how cycling is set, what's the tone, the attitude, and for cycling. And cycling could